Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we discuss the future of work with today's most innovative and successful people leaders. On today's show, we're going to be talking about Agile HR, the new role of HR in Agile Organizations. My guest for today's show is Gidion Peters, who is an Agile HR Speaker, coach, author, and Organizational Futurist. Gideon, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great to be here. I'm fine.
I'm good. Thank you for joining us on the fly. For everyone listening, I just spoke to Gideon about 5 minutes ago and said, Gideon, how about jumping on LinkedIn live stream with me? and he was crazy enough to say yes. So here we are.
Here we are.
So, truly agile, right, Gideon? We're making it happen.
It seems like very agile people.
Before we jump in, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself personally and your background and journey to where we are today and the work that you do.
Yeah, my journey began in the non-IT agile space, to be specific. So I've been an organizational developer all my life, and I kind of ran into this agile concept. That is where my brain started really working and thinking, how can I apply this in all types of organizational contexts? I was hesitant at first, but I kind of fell in love with it. So that's where my journey started a number of years ago. First as a freelancer, and then later I built up a company around it. So I am one of the founders of a company called Organize Agile. And together with my other founder, we've built up a company that now operates both in Europe and the US and in other regions, but our offices are in Utrecht and in New York. So that's the Netherlands and the United States. And basically, the HR field has fascinated us over the past years because it is a perfect place to start with Agile or to contribute to the Agile movement. So that's the reason why we've been publishing on it and doing a lot of training and consultancy around the world.
Amazing. So just so everyone knows, on a monthly basis, you're basically hosting Agile HR workshops all over the world with leading global brands, essentially, right?
That is exactly it. So those are workshops and trainings. They are IC Agile certified, very extensive programs, and we really like to dive deep with small groups of dedicated professionals.
Yeah, and I'm excited to read the Agile HR book when it's translated.
Exactly. Yeah.
My Dutch and Spanish isn't great, so I need to wait until it's through.
They're in 2 languages already, but it will come out in English later.
Amazing. Well, look, before everyone listening that don't know what Agile HR is, could you give us an overview? What is Agile HR? What does that mean to you? How do you best describe it?
Right. So, well, obviously, this is a collision of 2 worlds, the Agile and the HR worlds. I would say mostly it is about a new mindset, right? So it is about applying this mindset, which has been growing in the software space for over 3 decades now, and trying to translate it in a useful way to HR. And luckily, in Agile, there's a lot of people-centric concepts already, right? So putting people first has been a central thought in Agile for a long time now. And Agile HR is basically about increasing personal and people agility within your organization. So making sure that the people that are in your organization are better able to respond to all the change that is going on. And also making HR processes and the HR department and HR professionals more open to agile ways of thinking, working, and organizing. So in that way, it's a very broad field, and it's basically about a lot of experimentation and trying to increase the agility of both people and HR.
You say Agile impacts 4 levels. Could you elaborate more on that?
There can be a couple of things going on in your organization where it might be useful to apply Agile HR, and those are, as you say, 4 levels. So the first one is sometimes organizations choose for a big, what they call agile transformation. And more companies are going on that journey. So that is the first level. When there's a big transformation going on, how can you contribute to that?
So what does Agile mean for HR professionals in terms of the way they traditionally operate?
Right. So now we've done some research on this actually, right? So we've published, I should say this correctly. We've done the research now, and we're publishing the State of Agile HR report, in which we interviewed over 200 HR professionals. And what they basically say is that they see the need for more agility in the organization, and they see the need for HR professionals to apply this agile mindset. Now, the mindset is probably the most difficult thing to actually embody, right? So it is a completely new way of looking at the world and looking at your work. So for HR professionals, that means taking a very fresh look at all the work you're doing now and discovering how you can increase its agility.
How do you go about doing that?
Right.
That's the question, right?
So how do we get practical here, right? So
yeah.
Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that. So first of all, there might be certain HR projects that you're trying to manage. Let's say, improving the onboarding experience, just to take an example. Now, that isn't a project that would be most benefited by having a multidisciplinary team, not only HR, that works in short cycles and gets feedback frequently, right? So too often within HR, we roll out these big box projects, which as soon as they go live tend to fail or not be up to the standards. So just taking a project and applying those agile techniques and principles will already give you a lot of ideas of how this actually works. Now that is on the project level. You can also try it out on programs, on certain instruments, or even start investigating, what is all the work that we're actually doing as an HR department and how can we create better focus in it. So there you can use a technique that we call Agile Portfolio Management. To name an example, we helped a HR department of a big telecom company, and they slashed their amount of HR projects with more than 60%, just by realizing that, they were not all contributing to increasing the value of HR and the people in the organization.
And I know you've done so much work in this area. What are your favorite examples of Agile HR implementations?
Right. Okay. So
that's hard to. I know it's hard for you to choose, but I'm going to ask you to choose.
Yeah. Well, just to name such a project we've done recently, there's a big Fortune 100 retailer that's based in the US, and basically their challenge was, how do we create a new perspective on performance management? Because obviously that's a very complicated subject, and the question there is, how do we create a more short cycle feedback system in which we're not dependent on these very slow yearly or quarterly appraisal processes, and how do you create a more ongoing conversation? And instead of rolling out a new standard across this huge organization, we did a lot of pilots, we did a lot of experiments, and basically came up with a new standard that is more fit to them, and it gives way more space to individuals to actually grow, instead of having these secret lists which are compiled throughout a year and then suddenly come up at your appraisal time.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun to do.
And what did it take to get that underway? What are the keys to success? I'm assuming you have to have a lot of buy-in in the organization and engage the leadership team. What does that process look like when you're working with these companies? How do you guide them through this step by step?
It's often underestimated how important the role of leadership is here. So a lot of HR leaders are used to working within a certain mindset and within a certain context. And in an agile context, they cannot dictate anymore, right? So they have to trust this self-organizing team and kind of co-create with them. And also the boundaries of HR versus the rest of the organization should be, pulled down. So it's about true multidisciplinary cooperation. This means getting out of your HR bubble, and also helping leaders to understand that this is a co-creation process and not a top-down process anymore.
And what's the common challenge that you hear from the people you're working with? Is that what it is? Is it not getting the buy-in? Is that the biggest challenge? What's the biggest challenge that you see that they face?
Well, there's a number of different ones. I'm going to just state the facts here, right? So according to our research, they say that the biggest challenge, HR professionals indicate this themselves, is for HR to actually adopt this agile mindset. So they know it's important, really adopting it is another.
I had a question on LinkedIn from Kim Randers. How you doing, Kim? Thanks for joining us. He asked, what are the best tools that you've come across for collaborating in an agile way?
All right. So that's a great question. It really much depends on the type of agile work you're doing. So if you're just managing a project in a more agile way, there's a whole bunch of tools around that. To be honest, the tool I like best is called Post-its and paper and markers, because visualizing information, in our view, is a very important part of working agile.
Yeah,
and that means putting information radiators and boards all over the walls. Now, obviously, some skilled organizations have HR people spread all over the world, and then you'll need to use digital tools. The simplest one we usually start with is called Trello.
Trello, yeah.
That's a great way to start, just working with tasks. Another tool that I would recommend for the HR department is called Agile Portfolio Management. So that is a way of working that's very interactive, And usually, people think of Agile as only a project management way of working, but you can actually use it on a departmental level. So I see.
Is that a software? Agile? Is that a software? Agile Portfolio Management, or is that a what is that?
No, that's kind of a technique. So
a technique, yeah.
It's not a software tool.
Is there a standardized? Is there somewhere we could check out what that looks like? Is there a standardization somewhere that we could check out?
Yeah, so we'll write actually about the tool of Agile Portfolio Management in the State of Agile HR as it comes out. By the way, you can find the State of Agile HR as it comes out on the website. So that's stateofagilehr.com. And we'll also put a piece in there about Agile Portfolio Management.
Okay, so that will be in the report that you're going to be releasing as well for everyone to check out. Okay. Right. Okay, perfect. And there are a million different tools though, right? So Trello is great. I think we use that. Ivan, you use that, right? So my producer uses that, and he swears by it. So I trust him. I've got a question here. It says, "What's your number one actionable advice to become more agile?" Like, if there's one thing that we could do tomorrow, today, right now, to become more agile, what would that be?
If it would just be one thing, and it's really hard to choose from all the great options. And of course, as with anything, of course, it's all about absorbing more information about it and reading about it, because there's more and more resources. Just visualizing the work that is currently being done by your department, if you're in a department, I think is a great way to actually get an overview of that. So what you usually see is that there's a lot of work being done within the HR department, but there's very little transparency about it. There might be some strategic plan somewhere. There might be some emails going around, but nobody has a clear list of what are the actual projects and activities that we do as a whole department. And you can probably visualize that on one or two posters and just stick them on the wall and kind of start a discussion around that, right? So are all of these things valuable to our internal or external clients? Do we get frequent feedback on them? Do we have sufficient focus on these projects and activities, etc.? So for me, that type of a conversation is a great place to start.
Yeah, very. I did something similar recently, a few months ago in our business, and we can end up stopping so many different projects.
I love that.
And we just focused on the core things that were working us towards what we were trying to achieve as a business. And there were so many things that we were doing. We allocated resources and time too that just weren't getting us closer to what we wanted to achieve.
I love that.
And we had them all on a whiteboard in front of us, and I had the whole team around. It was like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And we were like, we don't know. We're just doing it because we've always done it that way. Or, so I think that's a great place to start. Salma Faison just asked a question as well. She said, how do you measure the impact of Agile HR? And do you have any good examples of companies that are doing that really well, or you personally?
Now, measuring to me can never only be quantitative. So there has to be a qualitative aspect there as well, right? So for me, it's always getting the full view of the actual effect. Now, there's a couple of big kind of pillars, a couple of big categories you can measure. So the first one, of course, will be around employee satisfaction and happiness. I mean, if they are your customers, and especially HR people themselves, they should be able to attest that there's something happening, there's something about that metric. Now, John Deere is a great example of that. They measure company-wide employee engagement and happiness every 2 weeks. So that is not just some yearly survey that goes out, but it's actually experiencing the heartbeat of the organization, being able to steer and adjust more frequently. So I think happiness and engagement is definitely an important part there. The other thing, of course, could be about project delivery, right? So how frequently are you delivering, and how valuable do your stakeholders think that the stuff that you're delivering is to them, right? So that is something you can measure in every Agile review you have, and normally you would have these every 1 or 2 weeks. So I think that's a great metric as well. And there's others, right? So if you are talking about projects, things like the cost of delay is a measure you can use. Velocity, right? So the speed at which projects get delivered. You should always customize it, right? Because there's no single way to measure it. So you always have to look at the situation and what is really going on there to get the right metrics up. But yeah, it's definitely something you have to be busy with all the time. Yeah.
No, I think those are great examples.
Yeah.
You just said, and they're very easy to implement, and this doesn't cost a lot of money. I know obviously ING is doing great work. Who are some of the other companies that are best in class when it comes to Agile HR?
usually where you see Agile HR working the best, those are either companies where HR starts pioneering itself, or there are companies where the broader Agile movement is really, getting up to steam and HR departments are joining it. So to give an example, there's a big telco company in the Netherlands called KPN, and their organization at large is moving towards a more agile operating model. And their HR department is also, well, I would say almost religiously following our book and trying to apply a lot of these principles. What you see there is that they're cleaning up their complete portfolio of HR projects. And they're also using this agile mindset to, for example, improve processes like onboarding. Right? What should your first 100 days look like at the company? They got together with their people from tech and their data people to create this truly multidisciplinary team and to improve that experience. Now, as you mentioned, ING, they actually have a team of more than 10 employee journey advisors. So these people are busy all the time with improving the complete employee journey. And what is also interesting is that part of their HR organization is also organized according to different phases of the employee journey. So that's a way more intimate, I would say, way to approach your employees, right? To really optimize a certain journey and to have people that are trying to make the journey as pleasant as possible.
Yeah. Why do you think it's become so popular over the last few years?
I'd say in the bigger picture, we're very early in Agile HR adoption. So, nobody has all the answers. But I would say that the popularity of it very much has to do with the nature of our work these days. So even regardless of Agile HR, why has Agile outside of IT become so popular? It's because it kind of lets go of a lot of the restraints that we've put upon ourselves, right? This industrial thinking, efficiency thinking. Right now, it's not always about being the most efficient. It's about being the fastest and the most effective, right? So being able to navigate this fast-changing world requires a different mindset. And I think more and more organizations are realizing that. So this is kind of why the Agile wave is becoming so big at this moment. Now, of course, it also has an inherent risk, right? So it might become overpopular. There could be a lot of bad implementations. And, frankly, some people might just, at some point, kind of, get bored with the whole concept, or maybe are not as happy with it. Because, they're like, I implemented Agile and it's not getting me results immediately. Well, that's true because, usually it actually takes a couple of years for a mindset really to land within an organization.
Well, on that point then, what are the common mistakes that you see people make?
So there's a number of things that might go wrong. So the first one is, Agile requires you to give a bigger measure of autonomy to teams. And teams do not always receive that measure of autonomy, right? So we kind of restrain them, or we still have this command and control thinking, which does not help these teams to perform. Also, there's this thing about psychological safety, right? So for teams to perform, there has to be a measure of safety within those teams. And if we do not protect those teams enough, if it's not safe enough, their performance might simply be lackluster. So that's another big pitfall. And the other thing I would say is implementing Agile, a very, let's say, standardized Agile version, right? So just something you could buy at a store, right? Some companies are looking for that. And they either apply IT versions of Agile and apply it 100% the same way as it is in IT. Now, that usually fails. So that is a big risk. And the other thing is, getting a Big Four consultancy and hoping that they will have the magic recipe for agility.
And I'm seeing those guys pop up every day too now.
Exactly. So it's kind of funny that when I would go to birthday parties 5 years ago, there would be people from McKinsey, and they would just laugh at me for being busy with this Agile thing. And now they're all jumping on the bandwagon. And to me, they might help in some cases, but some of them are not in it for the right reasons, or are not yet ready to really conceptualize it.
You're updating the book, right? So when you first wrote the book, what was the main message you were trying to get across in the book? And you told me before the show that you're updating it.
Right.
What was in there that people learned before, and now what are you adding for people in the new edition?
So we wrote the first version in 2017. Now, in terms of an Agile world, having a 2-year-old book means you have a really old book. So, so it was a lot of fun to write back then. And I would say our main message was, there's a opportunity here for HR people to pioneer and to really translate and understand the concepts of Agile and try to apply them in their work. Also to have a different perspective on people generally, right? So there's another great book by another author called Agile People. Her name is Pia Thoren, and she basically wrote this whole story about freeing people from all the constraints we put them in within companies. So this is the same line of thought that we had. In the meantime, we've discovered a lot of stuff, especially in implementing Agile HR. We see how HR departments struggle with it sometimes, but we also see great HR departments, innovate. And we try to integrate all those cases in the new book. So I think that, our main argument is still the same. It just has a lot more fun, practical information.
Before we wrap up, I know I'm appreciative of your time. As I mentioned in the beginning of the show, this wasn't planned. And I spoke to Gideon today. And as we wanted to be as agile as possible, I said, well, let's just do it now. Why wait? Why schedule the time in the diary? Why don't we just turn on the camera and just make it happen, right? So I hope you all enjoyed today's conversation. Again, I really do appreciate you taking the time out today to join us on the show. If there's sort of one parting piece of advice or guidance you give to everyone listening that's on this agile journey, what would that be?
Right. Well, if I had one piece of advice, I would say start talking about Agile in your HR department and start thinking about what an Agile mindset would actually mean, right? Because to me, that is way more important than the practices. Now, what about the mindset? How can you apply that? I think it's a good topic to start with.
Yeah, because if you don't have the mindset, then the practices are going to fail anyway.
That's exactly it.
You won't even get that far
No.
in the first place. And where can everyone, if they reach out to you, if they want to connect with you, learn more about your work, what's the best way to get in contact with you and find out more?
Okay. So our international website is organizeagile.com. It's with a Z, so for all those Brits out there, it's not
Yeah, we still think we got it right, so it's fine.
So organizeagile.com has our upcoming trainings, a lot of which I actually do in our workshops. And of course, you can always drop me an email, and my contact information is on the website as well.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you again for taking the time to join us. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your questions, your insights. If you enjoyed the show, please hit the like button, share this live stream so we can share the benefits and the knowledge with everyone out there. We want to get this message out to as many people as possible. Also, please consider following me here on LinkedIn if you're already not. And that way you'll be notified next time we go live. Also, follow Gideon on LinkedIn too, as well, right? You forgot about that.
You might even join our Agile HR group on LinkedIn, which is exploding as well. So
amazing. We'll join that. Perfect. Well, look, apart from that, I'll let you get back to your day, Gideon. Thank you, everyone else, and I'll see you all for the next LinkedIn live stream soon. See you later. Bye.
Bye.